This is the talk staring into the light. It's kind of the premise, a little bit of an analysis on tapping fiber optic cables. A little bit about me. I work as a senior security analyst in Atlanta. I've been in the position for a couple years. There was a talk earlier yesterday talking about a good way to get into the industry, and I kind of bought my way into the industry. I actually paid for a Nessus license for a few years. And I was going door to door in Norcross, Georgia, knocking on doors, asking, do you want a free vulnerability scan? Do you want me to, try and break into your network? It worked, and I got enough experience to kind of break into the field. So whoever had that talk can kind of add that into whatever they had. I should probably remember who said that. I did this presentation at DEF CON this year. I did a presentation earlier this year at B-Sides, and now I'm here at SkyDoc. Contact information down there. So, what we're going to go through, we're going to go through why you should tap. Give you a little bit of a crash course in fiber optics. I am not a fiber optic expert by no means. I know enough to be dangerous with it, but I can't get all the physicists with you and start talking how light works and everything. We're going to go through it's actually accessing the fiber mid-span. We're going to bend the fiber. We're going to go through fiber optic tapping, and some prevention methods, and then a Q&A. So, yeah, like I said, so we're going to start with like why tap. Now, I want to indemnify myself first. You can't tap things if you're not supposed to tap things. It's illegal. No one's allowed to tap things if you don't have permission to tap things. It's something that you're not allowed to do. Even if a company gives you permission to, even the company has to have it in their documentation that says all the consumers are aware and they've agreed that their information will be viewed by others. If they do not, then it's illegal. You can't do it. No matter what they say, it's something that's absolutely illegal. You cannot do it without explicit permission. So with that, we're going to assume that you do have permission. So if you do have permission, there are some products out there available. So, you have, I can go clockwise on here. So you have the Throwing Star LAN tap. It's for Cat5 cables. You have the NTAP. It's a good company. They make good products. The one at the 1 o'clock position is a Cat5 one. The one below it's for fiber optics. And then in the 4 or 5 o'clock position would be a Stingray. It's also for cell phone skimming, cell phone tapping, listening to phone calls. And then I just wanted to put it in here because it's the kind of this doggone NSA a little bit more, is the infamous room 641A, which is a room that used to exist at an AT&T data center in San Francisco. It existed for about 3 years, and the NSA basically went in there and put a bunch of taps in. So if you had any data whatsoever go through AT&T in that area, it went through that room, and they got all copies of it. So tap. Tap if you have permission. So we'll go into fibers a little bit. They're complicated. They're more complicated than Cat5s. Cat5s is copper lines on the inside, where this is actually a piece of glass that surprisingly can bend. Even that takes a little bit of getting your head wrapped around. But to go into fibers, so there's different types of fibers. You have single mode and multi-mode. These are usually determined by, you can tell on the outside by the color of the actual jacket. An orange one like this is multi-mode. If it's yellow, it's single mode. If it's like turquoise, cyan color, it's gigabit multi-mode. Single mode and multi-mode, the difference being is that it's the amount of wavelengths that are carried. Single mode usually carries one in one direction. It's meant for a longer span, so it's something that would cross a county, a state, oceans. And so multi-modes are meant for shorter distances. They carry a multitude of wavelengths on the inside. They go through WDM, wavelength dispersion management, something like that. Then you have simplex and duplex. This being a duplex cable, it's a fairly simple concept as well. I'll put the other one up. So this is duplex. It has two connectors, two cables. One's for transmission, one's for receiving. If you had simplex, it would just be one. That's used if you're just sending something to a location and you're not expecting a return back. That's usually more for telco, whatnot. Then you have the wavelengths that travel inside the actual fiber itself. This varies as well. There's a slowly deprecating 850 nanometer wavelength. There is the 1330 nanometer wavelength. There's the 1550 nanometer wavelength. And that kind of goes into the realm of physics that I don't understand. But when you're going into, for what I'm doing with tapping, the amount of the wavelength that you're using inside your fiber matters, because if you're trying to intercept a wavelength that your tap cannot intercept, it's not going to work. Yes?
The reason it matters is because of reflection and diffraction. If it's not a one-to-one match, you're going to lose a lot of the
Right. Right, yeah. So, yeah, it matters in the case of the tap. I didn't bring it because it's delicate. It's a little flower. You can't handle it roughly, and I don't like to take it to places, even though I took it to Vegas. But yeah, so right. So yeah, if you're not looking, or if you're in this case your tap or the fiber media converter that you're using isn't set up to receive 1550 nanometer, and you're sending at 1330, it's going to throw it away. And then below that, SCFC, STLC, there's about 20 more, but it's the type of connector that's on the end of the actual fiber optic cable itself. So this is an SC. They're square on the end. FC is a round metal connector. ST is also a round metal connector, and LC are the more common ones that you see in data centers. They're small. They're smaller. They're a little bit like SC connectors, but they're more rectangular-ish in shape vertically. So the actual structure of the fiber cable is kind of what matters most for what I'm doing and what we're talking about here. And just like a Cat5 cable, it has its own layers as well. So on the outside, you have the outer jacket. I think I really need to say that. But you have the outer jacket, the orange part here in the picture. Then on the inside, you have strength members, or they're basically Kevlar fibers. They're used to take the brunt of the force. If somebody's grabbing a cable and doing this, the Kevlar fibers keep the pressure off of the actual glass fiber on the inside and keep it on the fiber itself. The buffer is the white section sticking out from the strength members, and then the cladding, and then the fiber. You see the picture, is not my picture by the way, is the actual fiber itself goes down to 62 microns, and then the cladding's 125 microns. But you'll see down here, multi-modes are generally 62.5 and 50 on the internal of the fiber, with the cladding being then 125. 125 is generally pretty standard. Single mode, it says 9, but to get real accurate with it, it's usually 8.3. It doesn't really make a difference at that low a level, but for accuracy's sake. So in doing this, so like I said, I'm not an expert in fiber optics. This was something I decided to explore earlier this year, so I started learning about fiber optics about April or so. I knew nothing about them before other than they were glass, and I knew nothing about them. So I started reading, I started looking into it, and when I started researching how you would tap into a fiber optic cable, I came across a bit of a standstill in trying to figure out, okay, well, if I buy this coupler, if I buy this tapping device, how do I get down to the internals of the fiber optic cable? It's not like a Cat5 cable where if you cut down into it and you nick into one of the braided lines on the inside, it's fine. You just wrap it up in electrical tape. There is no optical tape. You can't fix it. Once you nick the cladding, the fiber, you cut it, it's done. That whole side, if it's duplex, that whole side's gone. It's done. You can't do anything else with it. So I had to figure out a less invasive way to access the fiber itself, and that took a good bit of effort on my part. I do want to say, in case somebody's watching this somewhere and they decide to chew me out somewhere, I did not discover fiber optic tapping. Pretty sure I figured out how to do this. Scars on my fingers definitely agree with me. If there's anyone else out there that has done this before me, then by all means, the credit's yours. But I couldn't find anything on how to access these things, and I called TripLight. They make fiber optic cables. They had no idea how to get on the inside of their own cables mid-span. It's one thing if you just cut the end off. That's fine if you're going to put a connector on. If you're going to splice a cable, you cut two and you put them back together. Or if you're putting a connector on, it's just chopping the end off. To access the middle of it, no one knew. Even fiber optic installation companies. I called several of them. I called Black Box. They had no idea. They're like, no, we don't. In their defense, there's no reason to get on the inside of these things. No one has a reason to access the middle of it mid-span, because if you do that, you've ruined the cable at that point, because once the cladding's exposed, you start having all sorts of signal loss. So It's really just for just doing this. There's no other reason why you do it. So I have a cable here, and I kind of skipped a step because it takes long, and I don't want to sit up here while you guys wait on me. But the first step here is, like it says score the jacket. So the tool that's pictured in the middle here is a Jonar JIC 375. I'm not a salesman in any degree. I'm not affiliated with these companies. They just make good stuff. This is a tool primarily made for accessing these cables. Again, for the ends of them, not for the middle of it, but it still works for what I need it to do. So there's 3 notches, as you can see, and there's like a little picture like laser etched into the cutting tool. On the top there, that larger hole is actually meant for scoring the jacket. So when you're doing that, you have the jacket, and you will just score it, pull it apart. You get on the other end. You want about 3 inches or so for the kind of tapping that I'm doing. So once you do that, that's fine. That whole section's separated, and you move on. So after that, you gotta get the jacket, and you have to remove it. And the jacket's made of PVC, so it's not nothing. It's not easy to peel, and even still, you don't want to peel it because there's fiber optics on the inside. Any kind of stress on them can cut them, or break them. I'm sorry. So what you have to do is slowly cut away at the jacket, and it's more of like a slice, or like a slicing motion. So it's hard to get positioned here. So what you do is this knife here, X-Acto. I should get some shares for this. This knife is sharper than hell. I don't know if, I mean, this might be my skin soft. I don't know. But I got so many scars on these 2 fingers here, and even during my presentation at DEF CON, I cut right into my finger doing it. Luckily, there's a Boy Scout in the crowd, and he just gave me a Band-Aid unexpectedly. I give him credit everywhere I go because I've bled like hell otherwise. So what you want to do is you just want to slowly cut away at the jacket itself, and it's just, it's a slow process. In the section that you're doing, you just want to slowly just go away at it. But I'm not going to do that entire section. So you get that, and once that's done, you want to peel off the actual jacket from the rest of it. Let that go. I tried that. I'll get into that. Short answer, no. These things do not like heat. The fiber itself, once it heats up, it's sort of like any kind of metal. If you heat it up and don't cool it off right, it gets really brittle. And while I was trying to do this, I was like, oh, just burn it off. Nuh-uh.
The optical properties of glass.
Yeah. And it makes the glass really, really brittle. So once that's gone, you're left with this. So now you just have the strength members, and you can sort of see a little white, where was it? Right here. You can see this little white buffer here. That's the fiber itself on the inside. So now what you want to do is you have to take all those fibers aside and get your scalpel, and trying to stay within vocal reach. So you just want to get that and just cut it off. Now these generally are Kevlar, and I've tried it with another knife I had at home. I didn't get the same results. So you gotta have something fairly sharp in order to cut through those. So now you're just left with the actual buffer itself. That's all that's left. And this was easy to get to, because anybody has a knife, anyone has patience and steady hands. That's fine. Getting into this part was the easy part. It's just, now you have to get on the inside of it. So this is where it started getting difficult. So yeah, I was like, well, I'm just going to burn this off. Like, that'll work. It did work. It burned straight off. And then I just had the fiber sitting there. Just the fiber, because it burned the cladding off too. I need the cladding. So that method didn't work. So I started, I don't know what I was thinking in my head. I'm like, well, I'm just going to Google it. So I was Googling how to remove buffer. I got 2 names. It's the buffer and the coating. Same thing. How to remove this from a fiber optic cable online on Google. Nothing came up. Next page, nothing came up. Surprisingly, on the 4th page, I remember this for some reason, on the 4th page of Google results, there was a academic, was it an academic? It was an academic article written by some guy that said, oh, you can get a CO2 laser and burn it off. Well, I went outside, and I don't have one, so I couldn't use it. So that was it. I was like, all right, well, on to the next idea then. So got to looking around, and I got to thinking. I was, at this point, I had already bought my coupler. I was like, I can do this. This is no problem. It can't be that hard to get into this thing. So my next idea was, well, I'm going to get this little skin remover here and just slowly cut it off. That doesn't work so well, because once you actually get into the actual buffer here, and this white here, this is orange, the other one's white. there's probably some reason they do that. Well, actually, there's a reason to do that. In some fiber optic cables, you can get into where this buffer here is like right against the cladding. It's called a tight buffered configuration. You have some fiber optic cables that are in a loose buffered configuration. So when you get inside the buffer, it's larger. It's larger like the actual jacket here is. There's several cladding, several fibers on the inside, like multitudes, like 8 or 9 or so. So once you cut into, you can actually slice that one away. Once you open it up, they just start falling out everywhere. That's lovely, but you don't get those in data centers. Those would be outside somewhere in one of those little pedestals outside on the road AT&T owns and whatnot. So, where's that? So yeah, so I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna slice it away. So thing is though, the fiber's clear. You can't see it. So when you start trying to slice this away, you don't know where you're at because you can't see it. And the first time, luckily, I had a friend of mine that worked in an old data center, and he's like, I got a bunch of spare ones. I'll give you. I was like, great. Now, the thing was, he didn't tell me they were from, like, 1992. I had no idea. Like, Ninja Turtles was coming out with new episodes on television when these fiber optic cables were being made. So they were insanely brittle. And, like, I guess it's a thing that the glass inside these fibers do get very brittle over time. It's very true. I found things, people are like, well, it's glass, who knows? I'm like, no, it does. It's like confirmed here, myth busted. So that did not work. So I was like, okay, well, I have to do something because I was about a month out from DEF CON at that point. I was freaking out because I wasn't going to mess that up. So I got the idea, I'm going to chemically strip it. So what I did was I looked online. I called the people who make this stuff, or not this stuff. I called the people who make the actual fiber optic cables themselves. Please don't fall. I called them as Triplight, and I said, I need to know what the buffer / cladding on your fiber optic cables. I gave them a model number. I need to know what this is made of. They came back and said, yeah, we don't know. I was like, please find out. So a couple of emails, 2 weeks. It took them to figure it out. It's made of something called acrylate. It's like a flexible form of acrylic. I was like, great. Google, what is a solvent for acrylate? Xylene. This is like acetone on steroids. Don't get it on your hands. It's not good. It makes it insanely sensitive and burns when you take a shower. It's not fun stuff. It's not a good week. So you get this, and I don't really want to do it because this room's going to smell like it. And they're going to come in here and think we were doing drugs or something. But so you get this. You don't need much. That's in this glass here. It's the same one. Little plug here. It came from Dollar Tree. This is filled up about a quarter way or so. You don't need much. You just got to get it in there. Now, I should probably correct myself. I didn't strip it off. It doesn't dissolve it. I don't know why it doesn't. I'm not a chemist, not a physicist. I'm a doctor anyway. So it didn't strip it. But what it does is the actual cladding and the buffer, not the cladding, the buffer and the coating / absorbs it. It absorbs it really, really well. And the stuff isn't like acid. Acid will evaporate very, very quickly. This does not. It stays forever. The fumes stay in your house. It smells lovely. So it'd be nice if it did, but it doesn't. So you let that sit in there 10 minutes or so. And when that gets done, you're able to get the buffer and now pull it backwards. It's very rubbery at that point. Prior to that, it's not. It's just like this jacket here. This jacket's very stiff, very rigid or so. And the jacket will do the same thing. It gets very rubbery as well. So it softens up. Oh, sorry. So it gets very soft, and you're able just to pull it back, and you can have fun with it. It's like Play-Doh, or not Play-Doh. It's like something very, very rubbery. And you can go back and forth with it. That's a good thing. That's what you want, because you want to be able to access the cladding on the inside. And now I'm able to do that. And little chem wipes down here, share. You get these, and these are called delicate task wipers. Right, entendres all day. So you get this, and these are actually used in the fiber optic industry to clean fiber optic cables when people are splicing them or putting end connectors on them. And that's a whole other beast in itself when you start putting end connectors on them. But they use these to clean them off because you have to use certain chemicals that clean the fiber. Then you have this chemical, or so, not chemical, it's a liquid called index matching gel. And it's a gel that has some sort of properties inside of it that helps match the index of the glass to whatever you're putting it into, so like the connector or so. So these wipes are used to dry off and clean off the fiber optic cable, and it doesn't damage it in any way. You can't damage that stuff. So now we've got on the inside. So now we're going to bend light. Couple things, and this picture, I like this picture. This is an interesting picture, and I've done it with these. These jackets are a little, they're too thick, but when I take it off, there's a lot of things I should have brought in hindsight. But when you take the jacket off, it's not strong enough with the jacket on, but with the cladding, I've done this, and if you get a little red laser and you point it down here, you'll see it light up in here. It's a visible light. You can't do that normally because all those little nifty wavelengths we were talking about earlier are all infrared. You can't see them. So you can do this, and it does this because light does not like being told what to do. It doesn't. Laws of nature, physics, I don't know, something like that. But you can guide it. You can kind of give it, right? Yeah, you give it guidelines. You can't just boss it around though. And if you go into a data center, you'll always see that any fiber installation that they have there, when it comes out of some sort of switch or something, has a nice soft 9-degree angle, and it goes up top, and it's a nice little soft, like Bob Ross designed all these things. And it just bends all nice, softly and nicely through the data center. And they do that because every time you bend it, you lose just a little bit of light. And that happens because, as I should have mentioned several slides ago, the cladding actually keeps the light on the inside of the fiber. It's sort of like think of it like a bouncer. And everything outside the fiber is sort of like the inside of the club. It's a bad analogy, but it keeps all the light in the inside. So it's like when you put a straw in a glass of water, how it bends when it gets inside. That's called total internal refraction. And I think I said that right. Right? Reflection. I'm sorry. So, is it?
Total internal reflection.
Maybe in the fiber, but when you put it in a glass, it's a refraction.
Glass is refraction.
Right.
What's happening in the fiber?
I've started a fight. Anyway, it's total internal with a word starts with an R. So the cladding, what happens is the fiber the light on the inside of the fiber tries to get out the fiber constantly. It's always trying to do it. The cladding has a higher refractive index. Yeah, see, I got the nod. Has a higher refractive index, and it bounces the light back into the fiber and carries it all the way down. However, when you bend it too far, it cannot do it. You can't bend something so much. You can only send it back at such an angle. So it starts to escape at that point. And third bullet point, don't do this because that's trash now. It's bad. You can't do that. You can do it a couple times or so, but if you just continuously do that, if you keep it in that same position for a long time, eventually something's going to go down. They're going to find a thing coiled up somewhere. So onto the tap. So I bought a tap. And that was an awkward conversation when I called these people, and they're like, "Oh, you just say, so what company do you work for?" I'm like, "That's not important. Like, I'm just an individual. I need this." They're like, "Well, we don't need to sell this to voice technicians." So the official name for this thing is a fiber optic clip-on coupler. It is used by telecom professionals to test voice data lines. And there will be a guy somewhere inside the road, and he'll have this in the back of his truck, parked up next to one of those little pedestals. And he has a little thing on his hip, connects up to a headset. Off the side of the clip-on coupler here is a little yellow fiber cable, single mode, has an FC connector on the end of it. That screws into this little box on the side of the headset, has probably a fiber media converter in it of some sort. Well, then there's another guy 50 miles away that's doing the same thing, and they get on the same voice line, and in that setup is able to send little tones back and forth. Well, it sends tones back and forth, and they know that, one, the voice data line's working as it's supposed to, and two, they're on the same line, so they can mark that and put it in whatever little spot it goes into in that big pedestal box on the side of the road. So when I call them, and they're like, "Well, okay, well, normally we don't sell this stuff to AT&T and Comcast and stuff." I'm like, "Well, I don't work for either one of those companies. I'm just going to give you the money, and you're going to send it to me." And that was kind of the end of the conversation. They're like, "All right, well, if you want to do it, that's fine." And so literally about my wife was a doll about this. I can't say nothing. She was actually at first she's like, "You don't need that thing. You don't need it. You can just tell people about it." I was like, "No, I want to do it. I want to say, like, this is a proven fact. It's not stuff you see on television. Like, it's true." So she eventually relented to let me get it. So I have to give her a lot of credit for that. Thank you. It's that little plug there. So this is essentially what it looks like. It's a small little device. It's not very large. I should probably put a banana in there for scale, but it's about this long or so, and about that tall. It fits in the palm of your hand. It's the best way to put it. Thing is right. Hold. I thought about this in time. Bow. So this little cover here with the screws on it or so, inside there, I haven't opened it up. I called and asked, and I said, you know, I want to look at the internals to it. They're like, don't do that. Everything's set in there a certain way. If you do it, it's going to ruin it, and you have to send it back to us and pay lots of money to fix it. And I was like, all right, well, what's in there? In there is a series of mirrors and prisms that take the light. Actually, next slide. It takes the light as it comes down, and like I said, you have to get down to the cladding. That's why removing the buffer was so important. So as it gets down, it bends, and this little wheel here is officially called the guide wheel, and this little track right here is called the prism groove. So when the fiber goes in this wheel, and you can sort of see, it's very hard to do. I got shaky hands. It's cold in here. There's a tiny little groove right here in the groove wheel, and the cladding fits in there. And then when you push this down, it takes a little bit of force to do. There's another little groove in here in the bottom of the prism groove, and the fiber sits in there. So as you can also see is the little track here. So this is metal, that's metal, that's metal. This, though, right here in the middle is glass. So when you bend it, that little bitty, like very certain section there takes the light that's leaking out from the cladding, sends it down through this little mess of mirrors down here, and then out the other side. So,
Question.
yes.
So you're saying that other fiber techs, like they're talking to each other 50 miles away, that they must have already exposed fibers, or they would have to go through that process?
Right. So the question was, other fiber techs that do this for the official purpose of testing voice lines, will also have to have access? And the answer is yes. However, they don't have to do what I did. On the side of the roads and in these little pedestal boxes and up in telephone poles, the metal ones, not the wood ones, you can't put stuff in wood. On the inside of these, there's these little trays, and they're called splice trays. So on the inside of these splice trays is a little plastic case, about the thickness of a CD tray, but it's a little bit longer. It's more rectangularish. It is rectangularish. When you open that up, there are several spools of fiber optic cladding just sitting in there without the part that was a pain in the ass to remove. So there's just multitudes of them just sitting in there. And from my understanding, that's in there because they may need to do something with it later, so they need lots and lots of spare. But so they just have those in there, and they usually, from what I understand, you'd be amazed. When you're not looking for someone that works for AT&T pulled over on the side of the road, they're everywhere. You go look for one, you can't find one anywhere. Because I was gonna pull over and be like, hey, tell me things. I need to know stuff. No, couldn't find one at all. When I get back, land on Monday, they'll be everywhere, all over the place. So my understanding is on the inside door, the cabinet, or on the inside the pedestal, there's a book somewhere that all the little color claddings are all labeled. It says this goes to Alpharetta, this goes to Duluth, and all that stuff. But I don't know. That's hearsay. So yeah.
When you have like 24 pair or 48 pair cable, it's all loose. It's all loose packed into the cladding, and then they come out, and some of them are a pink white stripe, some of them are a solid pink stripe, some of them are green stripes, some are green white stripe, and the colors are somewhat hard to distinguish at times, but I mean each one of those pair, the cladding itself has something around it that can identify.
Right.
So you can midstream tap and repair this.
Yeah. Now I called. Surprisingly, they're very receptive to me. So like I said, I wasn't a person who discovered and figured this out. I'm just a guy who just went to the links to actually show it as possible. But I got frustrated because when I got to looking into it, the only things that I could find was a company by the name of InfoGuard in 2007. They did another presentation on this at some security conference in London. Slides are lost, videos lost, everything's lost. There's no information anywhere about this now, except my website. So, if you look here on the I guess the left-hand side, if we're looking at it, the cladding here is actually red. And when I called and talked to this guy in Sweden, I should say he called me over Skype. A very nice gentleman, actually. When he called me, he said that they didn't go through the process of accessing the inside. They're like, no, that's too difficult. We couldn't figure it out. So they got a guy to come in, and he brought actually some telecom lines, and they spliced connectors on the end, or put connectors on the end of them. That's why that's red, because these color ones are typically, like he said, they got to be distinguished somehow. This one, though, if I was to open it up, it's clear. You can see straight through it, all that stuff. So this is pretty much all you need to start your own national security agency. Obviously, oh, that's actually a good picture. I forgot I had this in here. So yeah, you can see the little the little guide here inside the actual wheel, and then you can see that little well that it goes into. So that's a good shot of that. That's the wrong one. They look exactly alike. It's just where that says M, the other one's S for multi and single. This is a fiber media converter. It's like $25 or so. And then a Raspberry Pi 2. Just using these in itself, you can do this. You could pull up next to any place and open a fiber optic cable and start tapping it. Don't do that. But you could if you wanted to, and you have permission to do it. I'm not advocating that in any way. But this is all you would need. But I actually want to show you it actually working. But I don't want to play it in this video, so I'm going to go back to my desktop and just play it here. That way I can full screen it. And I'm going to pause it along the way. There we go. All right. So, this is, oh man. See, we got this. Okay, so I'm going to outline it. There's a black Raspberry Pi right here. And this is the sending side of my setup. So this is exactly what I did at DEF CON. This side of the Pi sends the data to the receiving side. There's a Pi on the other side. So it sends it in over the Cat5 cable into the fiber media converter. Fiber media converter then comes out. Go. I talked while I did this to try and get the right timing for it. What am I saying? Jesus. All right. So then you move on. So now, you can see the white one there. Pause. You can see the white one here. That's on the receiving side, and that's on the transmit side, which is also important because that matters. It depends on what you're trying to tap. If you're trying to tap people connecting to something, you have to be on that side of the fiber. If you're trying to connect the responses back, you have to be on that right side of the fiber. And you'll see on these things, I'll show it, but one of these is labeled TX and one's RX. So the TX line is coming down, and it's clamped down in the coupler.
Did you have to buy 2 taps?
No, just one. Because I'm only tapping the sending side. I don't care about the receiving side. Because I wanted to get people's credentials, not coming back and saying like, yeah, we got you, we're good. No, I wanted to see the credentials going by. So on the receiving side, the fiber comes back up, goes into another fiber media converter, loopy Cat5, back into the white Raspberry Pi. This is the receiving. This is running an FTP server. And there's a Wi-Fi card in there for some reason. All right, so there's the tap sitting in there. This is what it looks like clamped down when the mouth of it's actually shut. All right, so then the yellow cable comes out the side. How am I doing on time? Am I good? I start rambling. I can't think. So yeah, so the yellow single mode fiber comes out of the clip-on coupler, spools up, and it goes here, and that is a FC to SC mating adapter. And as I said earlier, an FC adapter is metal. It's round metal. The actual connector part protrudes out of it. So then that goes into the transmit side, or I'm sorry, the receiving side of this other fiber media converter. I bought 3 of these things. That then goes down. I wanted to trace it so no one could like claim BS on it. And then it goes all the way up into my laptop running Wireshark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in the IP address. I'm sorry, I should say this screen here is coming from the HDMI output on the sending Raspberry Pi. I'm going to ping the FTP Raspberry Pi, the white one. So I'm going to ping it, and now you'll see that ICMP request goes up. And as you back up, if you'll look, here on the sending one, there on the receiving one, every time a ping goes through, they all blink in unison. So that shows that they're sending a packet every time. Ping, 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 every time. So that's good. Clear. All right. I feel like magic doing that. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to start a capture on Ethernet 0 on the attacker's laptop. So here I am again, pinging it, and I'm capturing the ping request going through the line. I'm going to back out a little bit. I think I do. Yeah, I do. Do I? maybe not. Oh, no. So what I'm doing here is every time one of these pops up, another line pops up down here. Another point I should have made a few slides ago is that when you actually go and you do this tap, you're only causing about 3 dB loss on the fiber line, and that's nothing. You get more by just wrapping it around your finger. And unless you're looking for it, then there's tools out there and there's monitoring appliances and hardware out there to look for it. If you're not looking for it, you'd never know it happened at all. 3 dB is nothing. But in that 3 dB of loss, you get 100% of the data going through the line. Clear? Yeah, it's fun. All right, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to open an FTP connection to the white Raspberry Pi from the black Raspberry Pi. No, an auto track one. So there's the captured username going through. I'm typing in the password there. So now it logged me in successfully, and there's the password. FTP is clear text. Everyone here knows that. So yeah, so I captured that. Now I think I go back up and I run one more command. Yeah. So I list the directories that are available to me, and it goes down, captures that as well. There, for those that get easily distracted. Actually, that's a good shot. So yeah, well, that's not a good shot. That one is. Yep. So there you can see the user, Elliot. You want to watch Mr. Robot? So good. There's the user, Elliot. His password here. And then me listing the directories on the FTP. Oh, yeah, it captures the quit request, too. All right, so that's that. No, you're at the beginning again. Right. So, oh yeah, I forgot. Tunnel vision. Thank you. So yeah, this is the setup essentially for what I did. There's a much larger resolution version of my website. So I wanted it so you could see the TX and RX, so that matters here. So obviously here the TX is being captured by the coupler. It goes into the receiving side here, and then vice versa. And then the coupler goes up into the attacker's fiber media converter into his laptop. Trying to anticipate what slide's next. So a repetitive question I had at DEF CON was, well, how do you defend against something like this? And there's a couple ways. There's, to get down to a hardware level, they make and manufacture a bend-in sensitive cable that when you go to bend it, it actually will not let any light leak out of the cladding. It does this a couple ways. This is how people have gotten around patents, so there's multiple ways of doing it. But one way is where you actually have, I'm going to use my finger here because I have nothing else better to use. I'm using a pen. So where you actually have the fiber and then the cladding that would be around it, in between the fiber and the cladding, they put it has to be a micron or two layer of plastic or another layer of acrylate in between there. That way, if it does get bent, the light still stays inside of it. It's another layer just to keep the reflection inside. Another method that I've seen is there's a small, tiny, has to be a micron or two. It's an air gap in between there, and I guess that's enough just to keep the light on the inside. But I bought a bend-in sensitive cable, and I put it in a setup, and I cut down into the cladding, and I put it into the tap. It didn't work, and I was like, okay, well, it works as advertised then. But I was like, it can't be that good. So I soaked it in this stuff. I soaked it in that. Didn't make any difference. I was like, okay. I was like, well, that's fine. So then I bought some index matching gel, the stuff I was talking about earlier that helps match up air gaps when they're putting an end connector on. That stuff is $40 for 3 ounces. It's insanely expensive. It's like printer ink. So, which is more than gasoline by ounce. So I bought that, and what I did then, I don't have pictures of this because it's something I recently did because I just wanted to continue this on. But I got my JIC 375 again. I got this, and the last notch down here is actually for stripping the cladding off of the fiber. So if you actually just grab it and just strip it straight down, you can do that mid-span because the cladding just flakes off. It's nothing. I mean, it's literally 75 microns or something like that. It's nothing. Well, 0.75 microns. Is that right? We'll go with that. Sounds good. Math's hard. So I used this, and I got the cladding, and I scored it like I scored the jacket at the beginning on both sides, and then let it sit in that index matching gel overnight. Next day, Saturday, 'cause I work. The next day, I put it back in this again, and I actually got some packets going through there. I didn't get them all, but it was spotty. But what I'm assuming is happening is that tiny little air gap that's in there, that index matching gel actually like kind of seeps in there, and when it goes to bend, it's completing that air gap in there and letting the light pass through properly into the coupler. I'm still working the kinks out on it, but it did work, so I'm on the right track with it. So yeah, so there's bend and simps into cables, but the easiest way to do it is to use encryption. If you encrypt it, it doesn't matter if they tap your stuff because it's this garbage at that point, unless it's SSL v3, but that's on you at that point. But yeah, so I mean that is a way of doing it. It's pretty much foolproof at this point. You know, you have to get all the data in order to decrypt it in the first place, but you'd be amazed how many places don't do this, and I looked into that, and it's apparently I got this rant. It could be completely wrong. I'm just repeating. This is not my number. 64% of all data centers do not encrypt their outgoing fiber lines in the United States. I got that off of some news journalist website. I don't know if it's accurate. It seemed accurate, looked accurate, but I don't know. So that's kind of food for thought with that. And so yeah, and most of this stuff's at layer 2 also. There's a couple companies that make these devices where you just pop it in one side and have another on the other side, and it does its magic in between. So yeah, so this is kind of the end-all be-all way to fool any kind of tapping whatsoever. So with that, questions? Yes. Oh, yes, you first.
So I have network engineers always telling me that MPLS is secure because the only one that can see is the ISP.
Right.
Am I correct in assuming that MPLS connections are going unencrypted over fiber like this?
It should be. I mean, you know, it would depend. I mean, now, obviously, if they were doing something properly that they're supposed to, but I think if I'm right, by default, no. You know, I think that.
No, by default, it is unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tagged as unencrypted. Thank you very much.
You would have to encrypt it prior to tagging, or otherwise,
Right.
when you're sitting in the middle and the MPL and the labels are hitting there, if the labels are encrypted, it's just going to die ahead its next time. So you're going to have to encrypt it before you tag it.
Oh yeah. By the way, the question was, is MPLS encrypted or not by when you just first turn it on? The answer is no.
The question I had, and I'm ignorant of the subject, but wasn't something come out in the Snowden papers about the U.S. government tapping into things like this?
Right. So the government's a fickle beast, all right? So yes, what they did. So what you're talking about is the government actually retrofitted the USS Jimmy Carter, and I'm assuming, I don't know the details to it, but I'm assuming they put some sort of dry dock on the inside of it or something, and they basically popped it on the bottom of the ocean floor, pulled the cable up into it, did some stuff, and basically installed a tap on it. If I go back to this slide, you'll see this is apparently supposed to be somewhat accurate, but you'll see on the east and west coast that there's an NSA undersea cable tap, and that's how they did it. They outfitted a nuclear sub to do that because they had nothing else better to do. To tap our datas. Anyone else?
Yeah. Any concerns with removing one of those taps after the fact, or anything that has to be done?
So you know, okay. So I kind of tapped on that earlier. So yeah. So once you actually put this in here, and I did this at home because I was curious too. I was like, well, you know, I'm gonna give you your answer and add on a little bit more too. So I wonder what the long-term effects of this was, because the cladding sometimes is glass, sometimes is acrylate itself or some other compound or material. And so I actually set this up after DEF CON, and I put the Pis in there. I just plugged it in, let it run, and I let it go a whole month. And the tap was fine. Just constantly pinged. The ICMP request number got high. It was impressive, but it was fine. It was just doing its thing. And my concern was when I was thinking that was, well, over time, because that coupler, it clamps down pretty hard. And it's once it's in there, I mean, you have to like kind of pop it off. It's not. It doesn't lift. It's got like a pop to it. And I was concerned that it was going to put a depression in the cladding. And I'm sure over time it probably would. But removing a tap, yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not good. Like I said, once you get into this and this little buffer's gone, that bend is leaking all sorts of light all over the place. So once you remove it, you know, there's going to be light leaking out of the cladding from then on out. So they're always going to have that loss in the cable. Yeah. It's a good idea. Yeah, so there's pieces of hardware. There's something called an OTDR, hopefully optical time something reflectometer. Someone know? Right. All right. So it basically is a piece of hardware that they use to gauge signal loss in fiber optic cables over like from point A to point B. So you basically get to a point, you unplug it, plug it into the OTDR, and it tells you this is how much your signal strength is. Plug it back in, go to your next hop, do it there. And as you go, you're going to see, obviously, because it has like a little LCD screen on. These things are expensive. They're several $1,000s. There's a picture on my website for it. I keep plugging that. I'm really not plugging it. It's just where stuff is at. So you'll see a little graph that just slowly goes down over time for signal strength. And when you have a tap in there, you'll see just a little sharp drop. But again, it's 3 dB, so you'd have to probably zoom in or bring the scale up to see something of that small scale, you know, be on a graph. But it's going to be there one way or another. So once it's out, you know, like Josh said, you could probably paint it. I mean, it's not going to hurt nothing. It's not going to hurt the cladding in any way.
Probably what you do is you tap it so they don't know you did it, and you listen. When you're done, you just replace the patch cable with another one. What are they going to do? They're going to get a bunch of phone calls to reboot the router? Yeah.
Well, if you're in a data center, yeah, you could do that depending on the length of it. Now, if it's going from one side of the data center to the other, and it's like 100 foot. Yeah. Hey, everybody wins, right?
But if they showed up and it was just the patch cable had been replaced, and they just had a momentary drop, they wouldn't even know what to look for. That is such a Tennessee solution.
Yeah, replacing the patch cable would work. It would just depend on the size of the patch cable.
Just run a yellow cable finder for a day.
But you know, also, you know, if you were doing this in a telecom box, you can't replace that because that cable is probably 50 miles long, and if you cut it, you know, where the connection was working is now not working, and there is an AT&T guy out there to work on it then. But when he gets there, he's not going to want to talk to you in any way. He's not going to have anything to do with you other than calling the cops on you. Any more questions? All right. Well, good. Thanks. Appreciate it.